Please note that a blind person can read and do a lot of things. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe for more. Thank you. The sun beat down on the dry fields, casting long, shimmering waves across the dusty village. Crickets chirped lazily in the warm afternoon, and somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed, bored and slow. Ella sat beneath the old oak tree at the edge of the village square, her small, delicate fingers deftly weaving thin strands of straw into a basket. She couldn't see the golden fields or the cracked earth beneath her feet, but she could feel the world, the roughness of the straw, the whisper of the wind against her skin, the quiet sadness in the air. She had been blind since birth. Her world had always been made of sounds and smells, of textures and temperatures, of vibrations in the ground when the wagons rolled past. Yet even without sight, Ella had long ago learned how to live. She could find her way from the tiny, crumbling house she shared with her parents to the market stalls. She knew the songs of the birds that lived in the oak tree. She could smell the rain hours before it fell. But nothing could have prepared her for today. Today, her father had spoken in low, harsh whispers with her mother all morning. Today, the tension in the house had been thick enough to choke on. Today, a man was coming to take her away. Ella's mother had cried softly into her hands when she thought Ella couldn't hear. Her father had been silent and stern, pacing back and forth across the cracked floorboards. Ella had only sat quietly in the corner, clutching the fraying hem of her dress, pretending she didn't understand. But she did. She was being sold. A tear slid silently down her cheek as she tightened the last knot in the basket. She wiped it away quickly with the back of her hand. Tears were useless. Tears wouldn't save her. Tears would not change what was coming. Across the square, the villagers gathered in small, murmuring groups. She could hear them. Feel the weight of their stares on her fragile frame. Words floated to her ears, hushed but sharp. Poor thing. Blind as a bat, no good for anything. At least she'll have food and a roof now. They say he's rich. Rich beyond anything we've ever seen. The ground trembled faintly beneath her, and Ella's head tilted. She knew that sound. Not the creaking of wooden carts, not the heavy clopping of oxen. No, this was a smooth purr, a sound of power she had never heard in her village before. A car. A big one. The villagers' gasps confirmed it. Look at that, it's bigger than 3 carts. Shiny like black water. That's him, that's the man. Ella's stomach twisted into knots. She pressed her palm against the earth beside her, grounding herself, willing herself to be strong. A moment later, she heard the door open with a solid thump, and then footsteps, confident, crisp, deliberate, crossing the square toward her. She smelled him before she heard his voice. Clean leather, a hint of some expensive cologne, the faintest trace of city smoke. Ella. The voice was deep, commanding yet gentle. She nodded, unable to speak. The footsteps paused. She felt his gaze, intense and assessing, as if he could see straight through her, past the tangled brown hair, the patched dress, the battered shoes, straight into her heart. I'm Lucien Hart, he said, and even without sight, she could hear the authority in his name. Ella swallowed hard. She rose unsteadily to her feet, clutching the half-finished basket to her chest like a shield. There was a pause, then the faint crinkle of paper, money changing hands. Her father muttered something, low and miserable. Her mother stifled a sob. And then, a large, gloved hand gently touched her elbow. Come, Lucien said simply. Ella turned her head toward the sound of her parents, but no words came. No goodbye. No hug. Just silence. She let the basket fall to the ground. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she allowed herself to be led away. The air inside the car was cooler, scented with polished leather and a whisper of sandalwood. The door closed with a soft, luxurious click, sealing her off from the only life she had ever known. Ella sat rigid, hands clenched in her lap, as the car began to move. The seat beneath her was impossibly smooth, softer than anything she had ever touched. It smelled of newness, of places and things she could not imagine. Beside her, Lucien Hart said nothing. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the faint murmur of the road beneath them. She had no idea where they were going. What would happen to her? What he wanted from her? In the darkness of her mind, images flickered, fearful, half-formed. She had heard stories. Stories of men who bought girls like her. Of cruelty. Of coldness. Of cages gilded in gold. She squeezed her eyes shut, though it made no difference. Whatever happened, she would endure. She always had. Time stretched. Minutes, hours, she could not tell. At last, the car slowed, the tires crunching on gravel. "We're here," Lucien said, his voice softer now. Ella didn't move. There was a pause, then she felt his hand again, not pulling, not forcing, simply offering. Slowly, reluctantly, she placed her small hand in his. His touch was warm. Strong. Strange. He helped her out of the car, guiding her carefully. The air smelled different here, cleaner, crisper, laced with the scent of roses and something she couldn't place, maybe cedar, or some kind of expensive wood. The sounds were different too, no chickens clucking, no carts rolling by, no angry shouts or crying babies. Just the whisper of wind in trees, the distant trill of a fountain, the quiet hush of wealth. Her shoes, worn thin and cracked, crunched on polished stone. Ella stood there, trembling, feeling small and lost in a world she could not see. Lucien's hand remained lightly on her elbow. "Ella," he said quietly. "From this day forward, you belong to no one." She stiffened. "You are not a possession." He continued, his voice steady. "You are not a burden." She turned her head toward him, uncertain. "You are my wife," Lucien said. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible. Wife. Not servant. Not prisoner. Wife. Ella's knees weakened, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse. But Lucien caught her gently, his hand strong and reassuring. "Come," he said again, softer now. And for the first time in her life, Ella allowed herself to hope. Ella's world was sound, touch, scent, but sight was a mystery she had long ago accepted as something unreachable. Now, standing in the grand foyer of Lucien's mansion, guided only by his hand and the soft thuds of her own footsteps on marble floors, she was overwhelmed. The air smelled different here, a mix of polished wood, fresh lilies, and something rich and deep like leather. She could feel the size of the room from the echo of their steps, the vast open space that made her feel small, yet somehow safe. Lucien didn't rush her. He let her breathe. Slowly, she loosened her tight grip on his hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "This is your home now," he said gently, his voice deep and warm. Ella turned her face toward his voice, the blindfold still covering her eyes. It wasn't shame that had made her family cover her eyes as a child, it was protection. To shield her from the cruelty of the world. To make her seem less vulnerable. Lucien reached up carefully. His fingers brushed the edge of her blindfold. "May I?" he asked. She hesitated. After a heartbeat, she nodded. His hands were steady as he untied the knot. The cloth slid away, and the faintest breeze kissed her closed eyelids. She blinked slowly, though she could see nothing but the usual soft darkness. Yet somehow, without the blindfold, she felt lighter. Less hidden. Less ashamed. Lucien's hand brushed a stray curl from her forehead. "Better," he murmured. And she believed him. He guided her further into the mansion. The soles of her worn shoes barely made a sound on the smooth floors. She heard the gentle bubbling of a fountain, the soft rustle of indoor plants as the wind from open windows stirred them. Somewhere above her, the soft tinkling of a crystal chandelier caught the breeze and sang its tiny music. "Would you like to feel it?" Lucien asked. Ella tilted her head. "The fountain," he explained. "It's beautiful." She smiled, a shy, uncertain curve of her lips, and nodded. Lucien led her gently forward. When they reached it, he placed her hands just over the cascading water. Cool droplets kissed her fingertips, dancing across her skin. Ella laughed, a soft, musical sound that made Lucien's chest ache with something he couldn't explain. She traced the marble edge of the fountain with her hands, memorizing its curves, its smoothness, the rhythm of the falling water. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't afraid. Lucien watched her. The villagers had stared at her like she was broken. A burden. A mistake. But standing there, with her fingers dancing over the fountain, her face tilted toward the sound of water, her smile radiant even in blindness, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Not because of her face, though it was delicate and stunning, but because of the light inside her. The quiet strength. The grace. He had bought her out of duty at first, to settle a favor with a friend in the village, to offer her a better life than the one she would have faced otherwise. He had not expected this. He had not expected her. "Would you like to see the garden?" Lucien asked. Ella turned her face toward him again, sensing the offer, the warmth in his voice. I would," she said softly. He led her through wide hallways that smelled of jasmine and polished wood. She memorized every texture under her fingertips. The grain of the doors, the cold iron of the doorknobs, the thick fabric of the curtains brushing her knuckles. At last, they stepped outside. The sun bathed her face in warmth. She inhaled deeply, and gasped. The garden was a riot of smells. Roses, honeysuckle, lavender, earth. The air was thick with it, rich and heady. Ella stumbled forward eagerly, her hands reaching out. Lucien caught her gently. "Careful," he said, smiling. She blushed, embarrassed. But he didn't mock her. Instead, he guided her to a row of thick, soft hedges, their leaves whispering in the breeze. He plucked a rose and placed it in her hand. She lifted it to her nose and breathed in deeply, her smile widening. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. Lucien's chest tightened. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." But he wasn't looking at the rose. They wandered through the garden together. Lucien described it to her, not like a tour guide, but like a poet. "Over there," he said, "the hibiscus flowers are red. Like fire against the green leaves. The lilies are tall and white, pure as moonlight. The koi pond shimmers in the sun like spilled gold." Ella closed her eyes tighter, imagining it all. Her world was richer than ever. Because of him. Because of the way he spoke. The way he cared. As evening fell, Lucien led her to a shaded veranda. A table was already set, simple but elegant. Silverware clinked softly against fine porcelain. The smell of grilled chicken, roasted plantains, and spiced vegetables filled the air. "Dinner," Lucien said simply. He pulled out a chair for her. Ella hesitated, unused to such treatment. "Please," he said, as if she were royalty. Slowly, she sat. Lucien served her carefully, describing each dish as he placed it before her. "Here's jollof rice, it's spicy, be careful. This is suya, you might like it, it's smoky and rich. Plantains, sweet, like little pieces of sunshine." Ella giggled at that. Lucien watched her eat with quiet satisfaction, answering every small question she asked. About the food, the house, the garden. She was hungry, not just for food, but for life. And he was determined to feed that hunger. Later, as stars bloomed across the velvet night sky, Lucien led her upstairs to her room. It was a soft, elegant space, filled with textures she could explore. Soft quilts. Smooth wooden furniture. Curtains of delicate cotton. A small shelf of books written in Braille, something he had arranged without even knowing if she could read them yet. "This room is yours," Lucien said. "Only yours." Ella turned toward his voice. "Thank you," she said simply. Lucien hesitated. Then, very carefully, he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture as old-fashioned as it was reverent. "Good night, Ella," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Good night, Lucien," she whispered. She listened to his footsteps fade away. For a long moment, Ella sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers tracing the quilt's intricate stitching. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was excited. The days that followed unfolded like the slow blooming of a flower after a long winter. Ella awoke each morning to the scent of fresh bread and the soft hum of birds in the garden. Her new world was woven with kindness, a world she could not see, but one she could finally feel without fear. Lucien made sure of it. He was always there, not hovering or commanding, but present, like a steady lighthouse in her endless sea of darkness. The first morning, he had not forced her to come down immediately. Instead, he had left a note, pressed gently into her palm by a kind housekeeper whose voice was warm and respectful. "Whenever you're ready," it had said. Ella had traced the words slowly, marveling at how someone had thought to have it written in Braille just for her. She had smiled for the first time in years. A real smile, not the small polite ones she wore to survive. She found her way downstairs carefully, guided by her memory of the textures and layouts Lucien had patiently explained the night before. The scent of roasted coffee and the light sweetness of buttered yam floated to her nose, leading her like a breadcrumb trail to the breakfast table on the sun-washed veranda. Lucien rose as soon as he heard her approach. "Good morning, Ella," he said, his voice rich with warmth. "Good morning," she whispered back, her fingers nervously twisting in the fabric of her simple cotton dress. He pulled out a chair for her, always so careful, so gentle, never treating her like she was broken. Only precious. Ella sat, folding her hands neatly in her lap as Lucien described the breakfast before her. "There's akra, bean cakes. Fresh fruit. A little custard too," he said. "And, there's mango juice," he added, almost sheepishly. "I didn't know if you liked it, but—" "I love mango," she said quickly, smiling shyly. Lucien chuckled soft. "Ly," a sound that warmed her chest. He poured her a glass himself, guiding her fingers to find it easily. Ella sipped, the cool sweet taste flooding her senses. It was such a simple thing. And yet it felt like a miracle. Later, he showed her the gardens again, this time letting her move at her own pace. Ella would stretch out her hands like a child, laughing when she brushed soft petals or chased the delicate hum of bees. Lucien walked beside her, describing the colors she would never see but could imagine: crimson, indigo, gold. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said once, stopping in the middle of a sun-drenched path. Lucien paused. "But I want to," he said simply. "I want you to know everything that's yours now." She swallowed hard, touched beyond words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever wanted her to have anything. The days blurred sweetly into one another. Lucien brought musicians one afternoon, and Ella sat beneath the great baobab tree, her bare feet tapping to the rhythm of the talking drums and soft guitar strings. She learned to recognize the housekeeper's footsteps, Agnes, who always hummed old songs, Peter, who loved whistling badly out of tune. She learned where the garden ended and the mango orchard began. She memorized the soft turns and spaces of her new world with her hands, her feet, her nose, her ears. Her heart. One evening, as the sun set and the warm winds carried the scent of rain, Lucien led her to a new place, a small glass conservatory attached to the side of the mansion. "This is yours too," he said. Ella gasped as she stepped inside. The air was thick with life, flowering vines curled around the beams, hanging orchids filled the air with perfume, tiny ferns brushed her fingertips. A secret garden, she whispered in awe. For you, Lucien said, his voice rough with emotion. Whenever you want to be alone, or dream, or just be. Ella turned toward the sound of his voice, her throat tight. Why are you being so kind to me? She asked, her voice a trembling thread. Lucien was silent for a moment. Then he said softly. Because someone should have been, long ago. That night, Ella couldn't sleep. She lay in the huge, soft bed, surrounded by quilts and pillows that smelled of lavender. She replayed every moment of the day, every laugh, every new discovery, every kindness. And Lucien's voice, always Lucien's voice, steady and strong, guiding her not just through the halls but through a new life. A life where she was not hidden. Not forgotten. Not sold and discarded. She was seen. Even if she couldn't see him, he saw her. Really saw her. The next morning, she rose early. The air was cool, damp with dew, the scent of earth and growing things sharp and clean. She found her way outside, stepping carefully barefoot onto the damp stones of the garden path. The world around her pulsed with life, birds waking in the trees, the distant gurgle of the fountain, the whisper of leaves in the wind. Ella spread her arms wide, letting the sounds and scents and touches pour into her. She tilted her head back toward the sky and smiled. For the first time in her life, she felt free. Lucien watched her from the veranda, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. The early sunlight painted her in gold. She looked like something from a dream, her arms open, her face serene, her hair loose and wild around her shoulders. He had given her freedom. But what he hadn't expected was how deeply she would change him. Lucien Hart, the man who had built empires, bought companies, commanded armies of lawyers and architects, now found himself helplessly building his days around the sound of her laughter, the shy brush of her hand against his. He hadn't saved her. She had saved him. As she turned slowly back toward the house, sensing him somehow, Lucien set down his coffee and crossed the stones toward her. He stopped a few feet away, not wanting to startle her. Ella smiled, sensing his presence as surely as if she could see him. Good morning, Lucien, she said. Good morning, Ella, he answered. There were 1,000 things he wanted to say. But in the quiet between them, nothing else was needed. The days ahead would not be without challenges. Learning to trust, truly trust, would take time. But Lucien was patient. And Ella, for the first time in her life, wanted to trust. Wanted to stay. Wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, love didn't need sight. Only a willing heart. The days slipped into a golden rhythm, steady, bright, and full of quiet miracles. For Ella, every morning brought new firsts. The feeling of cool tiles beneath bare feet. The scent of rain before the first drops kissed the earth. The delicate brush of rose petals between her fingers. Each moment was vivid, more alive than anything she had known before. And Lucien was always there, standing just far enough to let her choose. Never rushing. Never demanding. Only offering. One late afternoon, as the sun began sinking behind the mango trees, Ella sat on the wide stone steps leading down into the garden. The air was thick with the sweet smell of ripe fruit and the low hum of evening insects. Lucien approached quietly. She heard him, of course, the even rhythm of his shoes, the soft rustle of his trousers brushing against the grass. You walk softly, she teased without turning. You listen closely, he answered warmly. Ella smiled, tilting her head up toward the setting sun she could not see. I had no choice, she murmured. When you can't see, you have to hear the world breathing. Lucien stood beside her, silent for a moment, letting her words settle into the warm air. Then he said softly. Maybe one day, you'll hear it singing, too. Ella's breath caught. Because somehow, in his voice, she already did. That evening, Lucien showed her a new part of the mansion. I had this wing closed for years, he said, guiding her slowly down a corridor she hadn't yet explored. But I thought, maybe you could make it your own. He paused before a set of tall double doors. Ella reached out, feeling the cool brass handles, the heavy wood beneath her fingers. Go ahead, Lucien said. She pushed, the doors swinging open on silent hinges. A rush of cool air met her. And the scent, clean wood, faint lavender, something old and grand. She stepped forward carefully. The room was vast. She could feel it by the way her footsteps echoed back to her. What is this place? She asked in wonder. Lucien's voice was almost shy when he answered. A library, he said. A library. Ella's heart squeezed painfully. Books. Stories. Worlds she could only touch, never see. She walked forward, her fingertips brushing along endless shelves. There, not all for sight, Lucien said quickly, sensing her hesitation. He guided her to a small table. There, carefully arranged, were stacks of thick, textured books, their covers embossed with dots. Braille. Ella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You. I had them brought here, he said simply. Whatever you want to read, it's yours. She touched the nearest book reverently, tears burning behind her closed eyes. No one had ever thought of her like this. No one had ever cared. Lucien stood silently, giving her time. When she turned to him, her voice was thick with emotion. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't move to touch her, didn't try to hold her. He only smiled. You deserve 1,000 libraries, he said softly. And 1,000 gardens. And 1,000 mornings filled with songs. That night, after dinner, Ella sat curled in a chair on the veranda, a Braille book open in her lap. Lucien sat nearby, not speaking, only sipping coffee and watching the stars. Or maybe, she thought shyly, watching her. She ran her fingers over the pages, slowly reading out loud. Once upon a time, she whispered. There was a girl who could not see the world, but who could feel its heart beating in every breath of wind. Lucien closed his eyes, letting the sound of her voice wash over him. If he could, he would have captured that moment and held it forever. Days passed, each softer than the last. Ella learned to move through the mansion almost as if she could see, memorizing spaces by touch, mapping distances by sound. She learned which steps creaked in the hallway, where the warm patches of sun would fall on the floor by midday. She learned the songs of the garden birds. And, slowly, she learned Lucien's heart. Not through words. Through the way he laughed when she teased him. Through the way he always warned her before reaching out to guide her. Through the way he never, ever made her feel less. Only more. One afternoon, as storms gathered on the horizon, Lucien brought her to the ballroom. Ella laughed in delight as she stepped onto the polished floors. Her bare feet slipping slightly. A ballroom, she said in amazement. I've only heard about places like this. Dance with me, Lucien said. Ella's heart slammed against her ribs. I don't know how, she whispered. Then I'll teach you, he said, extending his hand. She hesitated. Then slowly, trembling, she placed her hand in his. Lucien's hand was firm but gentle. He placed her other hand on his shoulder, his own resting lightly against her waist. The music, something soft and old and filled with longing, floated through the air. Lucien moved first, guiding her. Ella stumbled at first, her feet unsure. But he caught her, steady as stone. Feel the rhythm, he murmured against her hair. Don't think. Just feel. And she did. She let go of fear. She let go of the endless carefulness. And for the first time in her life, Ella danced. They spun slowly across the room, the storm outside throwing flashes of lightning against the tall windows. But inside, there was only warmth. Only Lucien's steady hand. Only Ella's laughter rising like birds into the rafters. At the end of the song, Lucien stopped, still holding her gently. Ella's face tilted up toward his. For a moment, the world stopped spinning. Lucien's breath caught. And in the deep hush between heartbeats, he lowered his forehead to hers, their skin barely touching. "You are light, Ella," he whispered. "You shine even in the dark." Tears slipped down Ella's cheeks, not of sadness, but of something too big to name. For the first time, she believed she was beautiful. Not because of her face. Because of her heart. Because of his love. Outside, the storm broke, rain hammering against the windows. Inside, Ella stood in the arms of a man who saw her better than anyone ever had. And for the first time, she dreamed not only of survival. She dreamed of joy. Of trust. Of love. Of forever. The days turned softer, slower. Summer rain came often now, gentle and warm, making the gardens bloom even brighter. And Ella bloomed with them, in small, beautiful ways Lucien noticed even when she thought no one was watching. The girl who had once been led by fear now walked barefoot across the mansion gardens, laughing when the grass tickled her toes, lifting her face to the sky when the rain fell in silver threads. She didn't need sight to dance with the wind. She didn't need eyes to see joy. Lucien watched her with quiet awe. He had built empires with iron hands. But Ella, she was building something inside him with nothing but softness. Something he could never have built on his own. One afternoon, after the rain had stopped, Lucien found her standing alone in the orchard. Her hair was wet, curling wildly around her face. Her simple white dress clung to her skin, and droplets of water shimmered on her arms. She was radiant. "Ella," he said, approaching slowly. She turned toward him, smiling. "It smells like mangoes," she said. He chuckled. "That's because it is mangoes," he teased. "You're standing under a whole tree full of them." Ella laughed, the sound bright and pure. Lucien wanted to bottle it and keep it forever. She reached out carefully, her fingertips brushing the heavy leaves. Lucien stepped closer. Without thinking, he lifted her hand and guided it higher until her fingers brushed the smooth skin of a ripe mango. Ella gasped in delight, both hands cupping the fruit like it was something sacred. "It's heavy," she said. "Because it's ready," he said softly. "Like you," he added in a voice he barely recognized as his own. Ella's hands stilled. The space between them thickened, filled with unsaid things, shared breaths, and new hopes. Then slowly, she smiled. And in that smile, Lucien found something he had never found in boardrooms, contracts, or fortune. He found home. That evening, Lucien planned a surprise. He didn't tell her. He only led her by the hand into the great hall, where soft music floated from hidden speakers and the scent of jasmine filled the air. Ella hesitated at the threshold. "Where are we?" she asked, laughing nervously. "Somewhere special," he whispered. He led her to the center of the room. There, he placed something into her hands, something small, cool, and strange. Ella ran her fingers over it. It was thin, slightly rough, a canvas. "Paint?" she guessed in amazement. Lucien smiled. "Not just any paint," he said. "It's texture paint. It dries raised so you can feel it." Ella's breath caught. "You can paint what you imagine," he said gently. "And later you'll be able to feel what you've created." Ella clutched the brush to her chest, overwhelmed. "I've never. I didn't think I could ever." "You can," Lucien said firmly. "You can do anything, Ella." That night, for the first time in her life, Ella painted. She painted not with sight, but with memory. She painted the sound of the fountain. The warmth of the mango orchard. The touch of rain on her skin. Lucien sat silently nearby, watching as her fingers moved carefully over the canvas, dipping, sweeping, swirling. When she finished, she sat back, her cheeks flushed with pride. "Describe it to me," she asked. Lucien stood and crossed to her, his voice thick with emotion. "It's beautiful," he said honestly. "It's alive. Wild and free. Like you." Ella laughed, wiping her hands on her dress. "I hope it's messy," she said, teasing. Lucien chuckled. "It's perfect," he said, meaning more than just the painting. Ella tilted her head. She didn't need sight to know he meant her. Ella tilted her head. She didn't need sight to know he meant her. The days wove themselves into a tapestry of quiet wonder. Ella read books late into the night by touch. She learned to play the small wooden harp Lucien had brought her. She memorized the scents of every flower in the garden. She lived. And Lucien lived too, for the first time in a long time. One night, long after even the garden owls had fallen silent, Lucien found her sitting by the fountain. She wore a simple nightdress and no shoes. Her hair was down, tumbling in wild, soft waves. Her hands trailed through the fountain's water, making ripples that danced in the moonlight. Lucien sat beside her without speaking. For a long time, they said nothing, only listened to the world breathing. Then Ella whispered. "I was so afraid, when you took me from the village." Lucien's hands tightened in his lap. "I thought I would never belong anywhere," she continued. I thought I would always be something people gave away." Her voice cracked. Lucien moved without thinking. He turned her toward him gently, cradling her face between his hands. "You are not a gift," he said fiercely. "You are not a burden. You are not something to be bought or sold." He lowered his forehead to hers again, a sacred place now between them. "You are a miracle, Ella," he whispered. "And I will spend every day trying to deserve you." Tears slid down Ella's cheeks, and this time, she didn't hide them. She let them fall. Because she was not broken. She was becoming. Lucien pecked her forehead. A soft, reverent touch. Not claiming. Not demanding. Just loving. Ella's hands found his wrists. She held on to him, steady and sure. In that moment, under the silver gaze of the stars, a blind girl and a lonely man saw each other more clearly than anyone else ever had. And without needing words, they made a silent promise. To walk into the future together. Hand in hand. Heart to heart. Sightless, maybe. But never blind. The rainy season began in quiet whispers. The mansion grounds glistened in green, and the air held the scent of wet soil and blooming hibiscus. Leaves shimmered after every storm, and the birds sang longer in the mornings. Lucien had grown used to watching Ella move as if she belonged to this place. No, as if she had always belonged to the world, and only now had the world begun to catch up with her. She didn't stumble anymore. She didn't wait for instructions. She moved with quiet confidence, her hands learning more than sight ever could. But today, she was nervous. Lucien could tell by the way her fingers twisted the hem of her dress, the way her head tilted slightly every few seconds, as if listening for something invisible. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. They were standing on the back terrace, overlooking the rain-soaked garden. Ella nodded, then hesitated. "I want to do something for you," she said quietly. "But I don't know if I'll get it right." Lucien smiled. "Anything from you is already right." Ella bit her lip, then reached into her pocket. She pulled out something small, folded paper. "I wrote you something," she whispered. He blinked. "You wrote me something?" "Well. I dictated it," she said, shyly. "Peter helped me write it down. But the words are mine." She extended the note to him with both hands. Lucien took it, unfolding it slowly. The writing was neat, clear, simple. He began to read. To the man who brought me home before I even knew I was lost. You never tried to fix me. You never tried to change me. You just let me be. And somehow, in your silence, I became someone new. You gave me gardens, music, books. But more than all that, you gave me a mirror made of words, and for the first time, I saw myself. Not as a girl who was blind. Not as someone unwanted. But as someone you chose to love. Lucien looked up. Ella's cheeks were wet. So were his. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might vanish. You are the most beautiful thing I've ever read, he said hoarsely. In the weeks that followed, love became their shared language. Lucien would tap gently on the door before entering a room, and Ella would smile, knowing it was him by the rhythm. She would press her hand to his chest when he spoke softly, learning to feel his voice as much as hear it. When he brought her gifts, he no longer wrapped them, he let her discover them with her hands, silk scarves from Lagos, carved wooden animals from Kano, Braille poetry books flown in from Europe. But her favorite gift was one he hadn't meant to give. One quiet morning, as Lucien stood on the edge of the garden reading a business report, Ella crept up behind him barefoot. She touched his back softly and asked, "What are you reading?" "Something boring," he replied. "A merger contract." She laughed. "Can I try?" He blinked. "You want to read a contract?" "No," she grinned. "I want to try reading you." Lucien froze as she reached up and placed her hands gently along his face. Fingertips brushing brow, cheekbone, jawline. She traced the curve of his lips, the slope of his nose, the scruff on his chin. "You always sound calm," she murmured. "But your jaw is tense today." Lucien swallowed. "I had a call this morning," he admitted. "My father's estate, there are things I've left unfinished." Ella nodded slowly, still touching his face. "You don't have to explain it to me," she said. "But you don't have to carry it alone, either." That evening, Lucien sat beside her in the music room. She had grown better at the harp, not professional, but lovely in her own way. Her fingers danced across the strings like they knew how to speak to the wind. "Play what your heart sounds like today," he asked. And so she did. It was a soft song, full of longing and safety, of silence and sunlight. He closed his eyes and listened. He didn't know how he'd ever lived without her music. Later that night, as thunder rolled far in the distance and the scent of rain filled the house again, Lucien joined her in her room. She was curled in her chair, blanket across her knees, reading slowly by Braille. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he crouched beside her. "Ella." She set the book aside. "Yes." Lucien looked up into her face. She couldn't see his eyes. But she felt everything. "I've lived a long time in silence," he said. "I built walls. Big ones. With locks. And alarms." She reached out, found his hand, held it. "But you," he said softly. "You didn't knock. You didn't break the doors. You just waited outside until I opened them." Ella didn't speak. She only leaned forward and touched her forehead to his. "So now," Lucien whispered. "I'm asking." He paused. "Will you stay, Ella?" She smiled, that quiet, soul-deep smile. "I've been here since the day you asked for my hand," she said. "But now, I'm choosing to stay." And in that quiet room, beneath the storm and wrapped in one another's hands, they did not kiss. They simply breathed together. And for the first time in either of their lives, they were home. Morning came wrapped in birdsong and golden mist. The garden glistened from night rain, and the breeze carried the scent of blossoms that had opened quietly in the dark. Ella stood barefoot on the terrace, a silk shawl draped loosely around her shoulders. Her eyes were closed, her face tilted toward the rising sun. Lucien watched her from the doorway. She didn't need him to speak. She felt him. She always did. "You've been quiet," he said gently. She nodded. "I've been thinking." He stepped beside her, resting a hand lightly on the small of her back. "About what?" "About home," she said. "About where it really begins." Lucien waited, his silence patient and warm. "I used to think home was a place," she whispered. "Now I know it's a person." She turned toward him slowly. "It's you." Lucien's breath caught. For a man who had spent his life mastering every negotiation, every contract, every billion-dollar word, he found himself undone by the quiet power of a blind girl's truth. They spent the day in stillness. No guests. No meetings. No phone calls. Only music and laughter and sun filtering through trees. Lucien prepared lunch himself, burning the plantains and overspicing the jollof, much to Ella's amusement. "I didn't know billionaires cooked," she teased. "We don't," he muttered. "We order chefs." "Then I guess you're not a billionaire today." "No," he said, smiling. "Today, I'm just yours." Later that afternoon, Lucien led her to the center of the garden, the very place she had stood on her first morning, arms wide, breathing in hope. There, beneath a tall flowering jacaranda tree, a simple arch had been set. Woven from vines. Laced with petals. Ella reached out, her fingers brushing the smooth wood. "What is this?" Lucien took both her hands in his. "A place where I'd like to ask you something." Ella tilted her head. The wind quieted. Lucien bent to one knee. "You were given to me once," he said. "But I never wanted something given. I want to be chosen." Her breath stilled. "Ella. Will you marry me again, not by paper, not by promise, but by your heart?" Her hands trembled in his. Tears spilled beneath her closed eyes. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. They were married there that evening. No guests. No orchestra. Just the wind, the leaves, and the golden sunset holding its breath. Ella wore a simple cream dress that brushed her ankles. Lucien wore a traditional white agbada with subtle gold stitching. He pressed a ring into her palm, a thin band carved with words in braille. She read it slowly with her fingertips. It said, "Forever, even in darkness." Their peck was quiet. Soft. A promise written not in words but in presence. In trust. In home. That night, beneath a sky filled with stars neither of them could count, one because he had stopped trying, the other because she had never seen them, they lay side by side on the rooftop garden. "Are you afraid of anything?" she asked him. "Yes," he said honestly. "Of ever waking up and finding this was a dream." Ella turned her face toward him, her hand reaching blindly until it found his. "Then keep your eyes closed," she whispered. "And you'll never have to see the difference." There were no perfect lives. They knew that. There would be hard days. Silent days. Grief and growth and changes they couldn't name yet. But they would face them all with hands entwined. Because Lucien had taught her how to feel safe. And Ella had taught him how to see. Not with eyes. But with something deeper. And so, the poor blind girl who had once been sold. Chose love. Chose light. And was loved, every day after, like a treasure that no gold could buy. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more. Thank you.